This is William DeBoard for IU Kokomo International Studies. Let's start off this podcast by posing a question. What do you think happens when a factory, corporation, or company leaves a town? There are many unused spaces including factories, buildings, and other locations all throughout the Midwest. They come from either fully closed locations or partially shut down areas such as the Chrysler plants and Chrysler lines, Delphi, RCA, Westinghouse, etc. When these companies leave a particular area, they can often create negative environmental impacts. Oftentimes, chemicals, cleaning solutions, various equipment, building materials, general garbage, and other forms of waste are left behind and they need to be dealt with. Sometimes in these same areas, children and teenagers and other people will loiter at such sites and run the risk of injury or even worse. Even less fortunate people and animals will begin to take refuge in these areas, but they can either become injured or sick due to the residuals left behind by the exiting companies. Just as important, if not more so, than the negative environmental and health impacts are the negative impacts on the economy left behind by the companies. The negative economic impacts on these companies often come from the loss of jobs, loss of local revenue through taxes and the local economy, as well as the fact that the expense of keeping these sites safe are often left up to local governments, but it's oftentimes not within their budget or is too expensive. This also causes property values to decrease, as well as other issues. It has been reported that 1 in 6 manufacturing jobs in the United States have been lost in the past 7 years. Manufacturing towns in the Midwest have been hit very hard as more and more factories close and jobs are sent overseas. The Midwest job loss numbers are at their worst since the Great Depression. The loss of local revenue through taxes decreases due to the loss of jobs. As people lose their jobs and move out of town in seek of work, that area loses its source of resident taxes. They can no longer afford to buy products and pay sales tax. They move away and no longer pay personal property tax, and the state also loses out on revenues from sources such as the DMV and other public departments. These companies also provided a huge portion of local and state taxes as well. In the town of Kokomo, Chrysler recently paid a partial payment of $3,795,497 towards its property taxes, and Delphi paid $68,000 towards taxes owed from filing bankruptcy back in 2005. Through GM acquiring Delphi, they take over Delphi's back taxes due. GM now has until March 1st, 2011 to pay the personal property taxes owed from 2005 in the amount of $4,615,399. There are many businesses like this all over the Midwest which are slow in paying taxes, but there are many more which have disappeared overseas and into other markets. These losses on taxes are part of the cause for what has led Indiana to come in at over $1.8 billion under budget. As more companies close or move elsewhere, situations in the Midwest will only get worse. Because of situations like this, federal and local governments have been subjected to filing lawsuits and being embroiled in bitter legal battles over the cleanup and consequences of left-behind industrial waste. For example, in 1987 in Bloomington, Indiana, a lawsuit was brought upon the Westinghouse Corporation by the city of Bloomington for cleanup costs associated with a vacated industrial site. In total, the costs were over $4 million, but Westinghouse was only obliged to pay back $1 million of those costs. The court's excuse was that the city should have relied from help of the EPA and state and federal services. When looking at how property values are being affected by all this, currently the national average for property values and median prices for residential properties and home sales are around $190,000. Right now, the median price in the Midwest region is averaging at about $147,000. For a better reference, western states such as California are averaging a property value of around $220,000. Many of these property value losses can be attributed to the loss of jobs and closing of factories throughout the Midwest. When going back to talk about the workforce and the wasted workforce that is left behind in these areas, it just shows that there's already a viable work source in place ready to go back to work for companies. Most areas still have an established and skilled workforce which would require minimal training for new jobs and positions. This could possibly cut down on trainee fees and downtime for startup production of companies coming into these areas. Many workers in the Midwest are brand loyal to the companies they work for and can constitute an already established customer base for the companies that they work for. Luckily for the companies, there are also many incentives which already are or could be enforced by moving into these areas. I think that there should be more incentives put in place by both local and federal government, such as tax breaks for moving to the area or for helping with the cost of site cleanup and renovation. This in turn could help entice businesses to come back to the area. There are already some existing incentives from national and state governments which exist for companies with greener practices as well. They can already claim new or expanded tax credits for installing new energy efficient windows, insulation, new doors, solar energy system, or other alternative energy sources such as windmills and electric turbines. Using an existing site could apply to these tax breaks through retrofitting them. Some other already existing incentives are the fact that startup costs and time could both be reduced through the refitting of already standing structures or using the pre-existing work sites as they are. I believe that creating incentives for businesses to use existing sites and locations can lead to an overall positive impact on any aspects which the Midwest is facing today. They could lead to bringing in new businesses, which in turn could create new jobs. They could also have environmentally sound incentives help keep the entire area healthier and more productive in the long run. This business model could also go a long way into helping the Midwest move forward into the future. For more information on this and other topics, please visit www.epa.gov, illinois.gov, indiana.gov, or ohio.gov. In conclusion, what do you think should happen now?